Hi friends, so following our mini lesson, we will continue to compare weights of two or more objects in our workbook pages today. So I want you to look right here at this little boy. He's holding two things in his hand, a book and a block. Notice how one of his hands is down lower and one of his hands is up higher. The lighter object will be in the hand that is up higher, and something that's really heavy. Think about that. When you hold something really heavy, your hands and arm might get tired and lower down, right? You wouldn't hold something really heavy like a bowling ball the same way you would hold something really light like a feather. So, looking at this picture, which object is the lighter object? Right. We will circle the lighter object, which is the block, and the book is the heavier object, so we will give it a quick X. So remember, we can compare weights by holding two things in our hands almost like a balance scale. Whichever object is lighter will be up, and whichever object is heavier will make our hands move lower. Okay, moving on to page 2. So we will do these four problems together, and then you will have to do them on your own on the following pages. So, red apple number 1, we have a pair of scissors in our left hand. Which object is heavier than the scissors? The paper clip, the book, or the rubber band? Think about how you would feel holding these three objects in your hands compared to a scissor. Right, the book is heavier, so we'll trace the book. Now moving on to number 2, we're going to do the same, except this time we're not tracing. We have to figure it out for ourselves. We have a notebook in one hand, and then in the other hand, we have a backpack with lots of books, a snap cube, and a pencil. Imagine you're holding a notebook in one hand and a backpack in the other. Don't you think the backpack would be really heavy and hard to hold? I think so. But we'll move on to our snap cube, just to make sure. A notebook in one hand and a snap cube in the other. Right, the snap cube is much lighter than the notebook. What about the pencil? Right, the pencil is definitely lighter than the notebook also because we can hold a pencil with just a couple of fingers. So let's go ahead and circle our backpack because we know it's heavier than our notebook. Put two of your hands out and let's try holding a marker. Imagine in your mind you have a marker in one hand. We are now looking for the lighter object. So if you have a marker in one hand and a notebook in the other, is the notebook lighter or heavier? Yeah, a notebook would weigh my hand down more than the marker. What about a paper clip? Do you think a paper clip is lighter than our marker? Definitely, but let's make sure that our last object is not lighter than that. A bottle of paint. Think about if you were in art and you were holding a bottle of paint in your hands and a marker in the other. Right, the paint is heavier. So our object that is lighter than the marker is our paper clip. Moving on for our last one, we are still looking for an object that is lighter. So in one hand, we have a pink eraser. We're comparing that with the weight of a counter that we use in math, a stapler that Miss G would use at her desk, and some tape. Imagine in your mind which one of these objects is lighter or weighs less than the eraser. Right, the counter. A counter is super duper light. super easy to pick up with just 1 or 2 fingers, but a stapler and the tape is definitely heavier than our eraser. I want to remind you that the size of something doesn't always tell us about its weight. So don't let the size trick you. I want to encourage you to imagine using your hands as a scale to see which objects are lighter and heavier. And remember, these are all objects that you know, so picture holding them in your own hands. As we move on, numbers 5 and 6 are pretty fun. You will go on a scavenger hunt around your house and you will find two objects from home since we're not in the classroom. If you have a book at home, you're going to use that. Then for number 5, I want you to find an object that weighs less than the book. If you don't have a book in your home, maybe you've got a newspaper or a magazine. Then in number 6, you're going to draw an object that is heavier than the book that you found. I can't wait to see what you find. On your own, independently, you are going to compare classroom objects. For numbers 1 and 2, you'll be circling the objects that are lighter than your objects here. And for 3 and 4, you're circling the objects that are heavier than the objects here, just like we did together a few pages back. As always, we have 1 lesson check and 2 spiral review questions. For number 1, the red apple, you're going to find a paintbrush if you have it, hold it in your left hand, or just imagine. If you have these objects at home, you might not have a counter, but you can hold them in your hand to compare weights, or just think about and imagine which object is going to be heavier than the paintbrush. Number 2, we're going to compare our Snap Cube trains. You're going to count how many cubes and write a number that is less for each of these. Write the number that is less on the lines given. Now, we skipped over chapter 10, which was 3-dimensional shapes. So we are going to go back to that at the end of the year so you can give number 3 a cross out. I cannot wait to see how you compare weights of objects you find at home or of classroom objects that you imagine in your mind. See you later.